Welcome and congratulations on making it to Rigging Isn't Scary Level 2. By the end of this section, you will be well on your way to conquering the rigging Valley of the Suck. In this section, we'll make an even better rig than in Level 1. It will feature automated corrective bones in the wrist and shoulder, a better hips control, and a foot setup. These are essential rig mechanisms that you definitely need in your toolkit. As a final challenge, you will also build a simple face rig with a little help from me. All of this will be surprisingly easy, because instead of just adding lots and lots of complexity, which may just confuse you, we'll focus on deepening your fundamental rigging knowledge. Mastering the fundamentals is key. This is something I noticed after I began making rigging tutorials. Teaching forced me to learn the fundamentals really well. But the weird part is that also made me better at understanding advanced techniques. That's why I focus on teaching foundational skills, especially at the novice level. And therefore, in this video and the next one, we'll set up a similar rig to level 1, but along the way, we'll stop and focus on little important details that many people miss. We'll talk about precise bone alignment, bone placement based on anatomy, and bone roll. These are vital things that you need to know. There will be nothing difficult, just watch the videos and try to absorb the information. And based on that, we'll build the cool mechanisms that I mentioned earlier. Get the start file from the downloads and we'll get right into it. Since we are focusing on good practices and fundamentals, I'm going to check my model. This is a habit of mine and it has to become a habit for you as well. So the model is standing on top of the grid. If I switch to front view, I can see the face of the character. That is exactly what I want. The character is exactly in the middle. And she's normal human size. If you need to tweak something for your character, do it before you start rigging. And then if location, rotation, and scale are not applied, select all objects, Ctrl A, all transforms. Then if the 3D cursor is not in the middle, press Shift S, cursor to world origin, then Shift A and create your initial armature bone. Do not move the armature in object mode while creating the rig. This way its origin will stay exactly in the center of the scene. Then under armature, viewport display, enable in front. Now we can start rigging, but before we do, please allow me to make one small change to my settings. I'll go to Edit Preferences, Key Map, and enable Tab for Pie menu. When I have it enabled, I can just press Tab in the viewport and go to Edit Mode, Pose Mode, or Object Mode really quickly. And for meshes, of course, when I press Tab, I'll get Edit Mode, Object Mode, Weight Paint Mode, Sculpt Mode, and so on. This makes going between the different modes much more convenient. You don't have to do it, just keep in mind that that is how I'll be switching modes. I will always let you know that I'm switching the mode, and you can also look in the upper left corner and you'll see which mode I'm in. I'll go to Edit Mode and I'll start building the spine. In level 1, I told you to go to Side View and adjust this initial bone this way. That is because we created the armature in the center of the world, so the default bone is in the center, and if I only move it in the side view, it will stay that way. This makes adjusting this bone for the spine very easy. But that is not the only way to do it. In perspective, you can press G then Z to only move the bone up and down. You can also use the Move gizmo. To extrude a new bone from here, I can select the tail of the bone, press E then Z so that the extrusion is straight up, and once more. My favorite way is still to go to side view, but keep in mind that there are different ways to be precise and you should be using all of them. Now let's say that you offset these bones a little bit on the x-axis by accident. An easy way to fix it is to select all bones, press Shift S, cursor to world origin so that the 3D cursor is exactly in the middle. Set your pivot point to 3D cursor, orientation to global, press S, then X, then 0 on the numpad. These are just a handful of precision techniques. Precision is quite important in rigging, so you'll learn more of these later in the course. Now that you can be precise, let's see how these bones need to be positioned exactly inside the body of the character. I took images of our character and overlaid a skeleton over them. This helps me determine the most important points on the spine. These are the bottom of the pelvis, the start of the actual spine, the start of the rib cage, and the end of the rib cage, which gives me a basic spine like this. From the side view, if I just follow my anatomical reference, I'll get a curve that looks something like this. An important point is that anatomy should be just a starting point, but we don't have to follow it blindly. If you align the spine bones like this from the side view, the deformations you get will likely not be ideal. Blender bones do not just simulate real bones. They need to simulate the bones as well as musculature and other tissue on the body. So as a rule of thumb, try to keep your blender bones close to the center of the volume of the body. So from the side view, instead of this, we'll get something that looks more like this. Let's implement it. Now I want to align the bones from the front view, and let me switch my pivot point back to bounding box center so that I can use my gizmo. Understanding the pivot points and the orientations is another key to being very precise, and you will learn all about them during the course. I'll select this connection of bones and move it down a little bit to establish my pelvis, and then I'll move this one down as well to establish the middle of the spine, and this will be my chest bone. From the side view, as I said, I want to keep these bones close to the middle of the body. The chest has some flexibility, so you can also split it into two bones, but we'll keep it to one in this example. Now I want to create bones for the neck and head, and let's look at our reference again. The pivot of rotation of the neck should be around here, which we already established, and the pivot of rotation of the head will be around here, which is just below the ear. So I'm going to extrude another bone and place it just below the ear. And then I'll extrude another bone straight up to the top of the head. Next, we want to create the clavicle or the shoulder bone. In my reference, I'm going to mark the clavicle bone with dots and connect them. So this should be our clavicle bone, right? Not quite. Again, let's follow the rule that a bone needs to be in the center of the mass that it's going to control. And what the shoulder bone controls is really the clavicle, the traps muscles, and even the scapula at the back. So in Blender, I'm going to create a new bone, go to front view, rotate it about 90 degrees, scale it down, align it roughly with the clavicle from the front view, and from the side view, I'm going to push it in the middle of the body so that it can control the clavicle, the traps, and the scapula. Next, we have the arm, and this is another important point. The base of the arm is this ball socket joint below the clavicle. There is a tendency to place this joint not deep enough, so somewhere around here. If we follow the reference, it should be here, and the elbow and wrist are much easier to align just based on our model, so we'll not focus on them too much. So let's grab the spine, go to front view, press Shift D and rotate it. And again, this created this tilt of the bone. This is the bone roll, which we can control with Control R. I'm going to talk more about it in a second, but now let's place this part of the bone deep into the body, just like we saw on the reference. And for the elbow, I'm going to enable my material preview, and I can see some folds here, which are exactly the elbow. So I'll place my bone here and then press E to extrude another bone and extrude it all the way to the wrist, which again is obvious based on this model and texture detail. And then I'll extrude another bone for the hand. Now let's go to the top view and move this arm on the y-axis and align it with the actual model. And again, I'll try to keep these bones in the middle of the geometry. In level 1, I already mentioned to make the elbow slightly bent like this, A very slight angle is fine, just don't make it straight or bending the opposite direction. This mostly has to do with the IK setup. We'll only do a basic IK arm setup in this chapter, but it is an important best practice, so please keep it in mind. Slight bend from the top view, and from the front view, keep the bones as straight as possible. The legs are similar to the arm. You have a ball socket joint at the hips. It will be your base guide for placing the leg bone. And the knees and ankles should be much easier to determine based on the model itself. Let's create a new bone. I'll move the bone and align it roughly with the leg. And then from the front view, I'll rotate it 180 degrees. Again, this is because the thick part of the bone is the pivot point, so I want to align it with the anatomical point that we just figured out. Something else that I want to point out is that if I create a new bone and rotate it 180 degrees from the side view, that will have a slightly different effect than rotating it from the front view. We'll get into that in a second when we talk about bone roll. So I'll delete this bone and place this joint in the knee area, which should be fairly obvious, and then extrude another bone and place it at the ankle. One more bone all the way to the toes and one more bone for the toes themselves. Again, I'm giving a slight angle to the knee, and from the front view, I want to keep these bones as straight as possible. I'm not just aligning them with the mesh, I want them to be fairly straight from the front view. By the way, another guideline that I use for placing this point is to imagine the side of the hips bone and place this joint right in the middle of the hips area. Next, we'll be talking about bone roll. This has to do with the orientation and rotation of your bones. I know it is not a sexy subject, but you will be so glad that you learned about it, because not understanding bone roll causes a lot of rigging issues. We already have some experience with selecting bones and pressing Ctrl R and rolling the bone. But what is this for? What's the point? On the Armature tab, enable Axis. And that will show the axis or the orientations of the bones. Now press Ctrl R and notice how the axis rotate or roll along with the bone. To follow along with me, roll these bones so that the Z axis is pointing straight away from the arm. Go to pose mode, switch to local orientation mode, and choose the rotation gizmo. The lower arm does not have a lot of freedom of rotation. It only rotates on one axis. So with this bone roll, I can just rotate on the x-axis, and that will rotate exactly as the lower arm is supposed to rotate. I'll go back to edit mode, select all of these bones and roll them so that they're pointing at an angle. Go back to pose mode, and now rotating this lower arm on the x-axis does something that is not realistic. And you may be thinking, well, I could just go to this kind of view and rotate the arm. And yes, you could, but that is not ideal. It can cause problems with rig mechanisms, but most importantly, your animator is going to hate you, because animators use animation curves. When the bone roll is properly aligned, then the animator will be able to control this lower arm just using the curve for the x-axis. But with this kind of messy bone roll, they'll have to think about multiple axes. Animation work is already difficult, and this makes it into a nightmare. So go back to edit mode, select all of these bones, and roll them so that the z-axis points straight away from the arm. And you can do the same for the shoulder bone in case it is not aligned well. The spine is mostly fine, but if you remember, I showed you how to fix the spine in case you moved it on the x-axis, and that actually tweaked the bone roll slightly. If I select one of the spine bones and look under End Panel, Item, you'll see the actual value of the roll, and it is not exactly 0. So I can set it to 0 right here, or I can select all bones and press Alt-R, and that clears the roll, or in other words, sets the roll to 0. So now the spine bones are perfectly aligned. In case your leg bones need to be adjusted, select them and press Ctrl R. And to follow along with me, align the axis exactly as you see here, with this Z pointing away from the knee, the hips, and so on. I just want to point out that the Z-axis pointing forward like this is not the ultimate correct answer. For example, if I roll the bone so that the X points forward, that is also okay. I'm going to undo. A bit earlier in the video, I said that rotating a bone from the front view has a slightly different effect from rotating the same bone from the side view or another view. Now that you understand bone roll and axis, let's see what the difference is. I'll create a new armature for this demonstration. Enable in front, go to edit mode, select the default bone, press R and rotate it about 180 degrees. And I'll place it here. Then I'll create a new bone, which will have the exact same orientation as the default bone. Then go to side view and rotate it about 180 degrees. And I'll place it next to my default bone. Visually, these bones look exactly the same, but if we enable axis, you'll see that the x-axis and the z-axis are pointing in the exact opposite direction. If I create a new bone, you'll see how the bone axis rotates with it. And that is why we get a different roll depending on the view that we rotate the bone in. I'm just mentioning this because from this level onward, you really have to pay attention to bone roll. Just looking at the bone and thinking, I guess it looks okay, is not enough anymore. So always keep in mind bone axis and bone roll, because in pose mode, they define the rotation of the bone. Here, for example, if I rotate this bone on positive X, it swings in this direction, whereas this bone with the opposite axis, if I give it a positive X value, it rotates in the opposite direction. So bone roll is important to define the exact rotation of a bone. Bone roll is an even deeper rabbit hole that we are going to explore in level 3, intermediate rigging. In pose mode, it also has to do with this rotation mode. For now, just try to keep the axis nice and clean so that rotating on just one axis produces a natural result, such as bending the lower arm, or if we look at the upper arm, Z rotation is up and down, and X rotation is forward and back. So that is it, keep the axis clean. Great, I think this part wasn't too difficult. So let's go straight into the next one, in which we'll add fingers. And the fingers will help us understand bone roll on an even deeper level. Continuing from the previous video, we also want to give our character finger bones. And now that we understand bone roll, we can align those fingers perfectly. Here is how. A very common mistake is to place the base of the finger where we see some folds on the hand. In reality, the base of the fingers is much deeper. It's easier to see on the knuckles of your own hand. The rest of the joints are much easier to determine. They are more or less where you see folds on the fingers. Placing the thumb can be challenging as well. It's best to look at anatomical diagrams to understand its placement. So our finger bones will look something like this. The hand also has palm bones. We'll skip them for now, and we'll have a full hand setup in level 3 of the course. Let's go to edit mode, zoom in on the hand, and I'll find the knuckles, which is indicated by this geometry here, and I'll shift and click and place my 3D cursor here and press Shift A to create a new bone. If I scale it down now, it will scale from the middle. Let's set the pivot point to individual origins and scale down now, and it will scale from the base of the bone. Here is my favorite way to align fingers. I'll switch snapping to volume and enable snapping. I'll grab the base of the bone and move it near the knuckle, and it will snap inside the volume of the hand. Then I'll take this end of the bone and snap it near the end of the finger. In a second, we are going to subdivide this bone so that we get 3 finger bones. Next, I'll duplicate this bone and again snap the base at the knuckle and the end of the bone at the end of the finger. Let's repeat this. And now for the thumb. I'll duplicate this bone, snap the base around here, and the end of the bone at the end of the thumb. I'll disable snapping, and here is something that I think will help you understand bone roll even better. I'll go to pose mode and select all of these finger bones and the thumb bone. My orientation is set to local and pivot to individual origins, which means that each bone in my selection will rotate on its own local axis. So with the rotation gizmo, if I rotate on the Z axis, all bones will rotate in the same direction. But the natural rotation of the thumb is actually on the X axis. Let's go to edit mode, press Ctrl R for the thumb, and rotate it like this. Then again, select all of these finger bones and the thumb, and rotate on the Z axis. Now all fingers rotate down, but the thumb rotates out. Let's go back to edit mode, press Ctrl R, and then type 180, so that will flip the axis. And now let's do the rotation test again, and you'll see that the bones rotate down and the thumb rotates in, which is the most natural type of rotation. With this setup, go to edit mode, select all fingers and the thumb, right-click, subdivide, and set number of cuts to 2. Now we have 3 bones for each finger. And here is a nice good practice. Go to the front view, select all middle phalanges, and move them up just slightly. That creates a slight curvature, and that is the same as giving a little bit of an angle to the elbow or knee. It's just a nice best practice that is not so important now, but it will become more important as you build more complex rigs. Now for the thumb, I'm going to align my view based on the axis of rotation of the thumb and create the curvature of the thumb this way. And this, in my opinion, is perfect finger alignment. There is a slight natural curvature on the axis the fingers are supposed to rotate on, and they are completely straight from the top view because fingers are not supposed to bend sideways. Good job so far. We are going deep into these fundamentals that will make your work so much easier. We covered a lot of ground. Let's take a breather and do something simple. Let's name the bones. I'll name this bone hips, spine, chest, neck, head. Now we come to the symmetrical part of the rig, but let's say that I forgot to use the .l suffix. So I'll just name this bone shoulder, then upper arm, and so on, without typing .l. In a minute, I'm going to show you a cool trick to automatically add the .l suffix to all bones that need it. To add the .l suffix, I can select all bones on the left side in edit mode and go to armature, names, auto name left right. And now .l will be added to all of these bones. Technically, you can even select the middle bones. As long as they're right in the center, Blender will not give them a suffix. But if there is a tiny offset in the bones, they may get a suffix, so to keep it safe, select only bones that are clearly on one side of the rig. It's always nice to discover some of these cool tricks. And of course, let's not forget parenting. In pose mode, a lot of my bones are disconnected. So in edit mode, I'm going to select all of the base finger bones, shift select the hand, Ctrl P, keep offset. And also select the upper arm, shift select the shoulder, Ctrl P, keep offset. So parenting should be fairly familiar to you by now, but a question I received was, what is this space between the parented bones? Especially if you have experience with other software, you may expect all bones to be connected to each other, so the shoulder may look something like this. As far as parenting goes, there is no significant difference between having the bones connected or disconnected. It can make a difference when creating rig mechanisms In general, try to keep your bones connected, but don't be afraid to use disconnected parenting if that helps you position and orient your bones better. For example, if I wanted to connect the upper arm and the shoulder, I would either have to move the pivot point of the upper arm, which I don't want to do, or tilt the shoulder bone, which makes the orientation of this bone and therefore the animation curves more complex. And if I wanted to connect the shoulder and the chest, the shoulder would have to rotate from the neck, which I absolutely don't want. Let's parent the shoulder to the chest with keep offset, the thigh to the hips, and parenting should be down now. Next, we're going to set up IK for the leg, and it will be done exactly as in level 1, but we'll go into more detail at each step. Knowing where to click is nice, but understanding why we do it is so much more useful. I'll go to edit mode, select the ankle, press E and then Y to extrude the bone on the Y-axis. And now you should understand why we extrude it on the Y-axis. We want to keep the bone straight so that it has nice orientations, which will help the animator. Next, I want to set up the IK. We set up constraints in pose mode. And so in the previous part, I showed you how to do it manually. There's actually a faster way. Select this bone, which will be the target, and let's name it leg IK target.L. Then shift select the shin, press Ctrl, Shift and C, and choose inverse kinematics. So that is not only a nice shortcut, but because I selected the target first and then the shin, the constraint was applied to the shin and the target was set up automatically. We already know that we have to set chain length to 2 so that it only affects the shin and the thigh. And in level 1, I told you to select the target in edit mode and press Alt-P and clear the parent. We are not going to do it yet. Let's see why we're doing it. Because of the way I created this bone, it is parented and connected to the shin bone. If I go to pose mode and try to move it, I'm actually unable to do so. The bone rotates because it is unable to move, and so Blender goes for rotation. I'll right click to cancel. So let's go to edit mode and press Alt-P, and instead of clear parent, let's disconnect the bone. This will keep the parenting, but it will allow me to move this bone freely. And this is how we can go from connected parenting to disconnected parenting. Back to pose mode. If I try to move this bone, you'll see that it kind of works, but our leg suddenly flips to random locations and then it goes back. This is called a dependency loop. The target bone is still parented to the shin, but because of the IK constraint, the shin's location is also affected by the target. So they both affect each other and Blender gets confused. That is why we have to go to edit mode, press Alt-P and clear the parent of this bone completely. Now the only relationship is the shin is affected by the target bone. So we get predictable movement. Let's create a pole target as well. Select the knee, press E then Y to create a straight bone, press Alt-P, clear parent, G and Y to offset this pole and name it leg pole.L. Go to pose mode. There is no automatic way to set the pole, so set pole target to the armature, and then for the bone, we're going to use our leg pole. If you're curious about this flipping of the IK chain, it has to do with bone orientations. The IK constraint tries to orient the x-axis of the bones towards the pole. That is why we use this pole angle to correct this. There is absolutely no harm in using it. Because I extruded my bone straight up, I just have to set the pole angle to exactly 90 degrees and it will be oriented perfectly. Here I disable and enable the IK constraint to check my pole angle. If your leg bones change a lot between the two states, you have to keep adjusting the pole angle. Next, we have the problem of the foot rotating when I move the body. Pause the video and try to figure out why that is happening. It is because the foot is parented to the shin. So when I move the body, the shin rotates and the foot rotates with it. That is why we go to edit mode, select the foot, shift select the target, press Ctrl P and parent with keep offset. Now the foot is parented to the target, so it will no longer rotate with the shin. And now we have this next problem that we can move the body and disconnect the foot from the shin. And we solve this by giving the foot a copy location constraint. Copy location also has target, so we can select the shin, shift select the foot, press Ctrl-Shift-C and choose copy location. That will add the constraint and set the target. Then just set the head-tail slider to 1 so that the foot is attached to the end and not to the start of the shin bone. And we're almost done. One last thing that many people seem to be confused about, and that is the difference between parenting and setting constraints when we use shortcuts. When we parent, we select the child, or actually we can select multiple children, and then finally we shift select the final bone, which will be the parent, and we press Ctrl-P to finalize the parenting. So the final selected bone is the one that controls the other bones. With constraints, we first select the target, and then we select the bone that will be constrained, so it can kind of seem like the selection order is inverted. It is best to just think about these two as completely different operations, because they are. In parenting, the last selected bones becomes the parent. With constraints, the last selected bone gets the constraint, and the other bone becomes the target for the constraint. Now I'll go to edit mode, and let me parent the pole target to the IK target, Ctrl-P, keep offset. As I said in level 1, this creates a simple and natural movement of the leg using only the IK target. Now I'm ready to symmetrize. I'll go to edit mode, select all bones, right click and choose symmetrize. In pose mode, I'm going to check if everything is alright, and it seems to be. If your bones do not get symmetrized, here are the two top reasons. 1. You did not properly name your symmetrical bones with the .l or .r suffix. So carefully check your bone names. And number 2, if we go to object mode, the pivot point of my rig is exactly in the middle of the world. If you follow this tutorial exactly, so you set your cursor to the world origin and then Shift A and created your armature will start exactly in the center of the world and you will not have any symmetrization problems. So start with your armature in the center of the world and then do not move it in object mode. Go to edit mode and start creating your armature this way. I'll delete this. Let's go to pose mode. And I want to set all of these target bones as non-deforming, which you may remember from level 1. All of my other bones are meant to deform the character, but these 4 are just controls. So go to the bone tab, and instead of disabling them one by one, you can Alt and click on the deform option, and all bones will be set up. If Alt and click doesn't work for you, you can do this instead. Just disable the deform without holding Alt, then right click on it and choose copy to selected. This will also disable the deform option on all selected bones. Now I can select all meshes, shift select my rig so that it is active, and then press Ctrl-P and automatic weights. And now I'll be able to go to pose mode and deform my rig. And with that, our basic setup is done. We took our time and learned a lot about bone positions and bone roll. This is knowledge that will definitely pay off. So with this deeper understanding of fundamentals, we will move on to the next 2 videos in which we will set up a couple of cool rig mechanisms: automatic twist bones, improved hips control, and a foot mechanism. I guess that was enough fundamentals to last you for a while. So to switch things up, the next 2 videos will be action-packed and will create the rig mechanisms: a wrist twist, a shoulder twist, hips control, and advanced foot setup. I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is. Let's get right into it. The first problem that we want to solve is the wrist twist. If I select the hand and enable the rotation gizmo and rotate the arm on the y-axis, we get the so-called candy wrapper effect. In reality, the part of the forearm that is close to the hand twists along with the hand, and the part close to the elbow is mostly static. Try this with your own arm. Make it into an observation exercise. Observation will help you create better rigs. The way this is usually solved is by adding a bone in the wrist that twists along with the hand, while the main lower arm bone stays static. This is not exactly anatomically correct, but we only use anatomy as a reference. The goal is to create the effect we observe in the simplest way possible. I'll enable overlays and reset the transforms. I'll go to edit mode, and I want a bone that is aligned exactly with the lower arm. It has the same orientation, but it is just shorter than it, about 1/3. Here is an easy way to do that. Press Shift D and duplicate the bone, and then right-click to cancel the movement. So we did duplicate the bone and placed it exactly at the same position as the original bone. And then right-click again and choose Subdivide. And then for number of cuts, choose 2. Then I'll enable X-ray to see my bones. And now I have 3 bones. I'll hide the big original bone. And because I only want 1 twist bone, I'm going to select these 2 and delete them. Then Alt-H to unhide the lower arm. Click a couple of times here to select your twist bone, press F2 and name it lower arm twist.L. And generally, I want this bone to move with the lower arm. So I'll shift select the lower arm and press Ctrl P, keep offset. And as a result, in pose mode, if I rotate the lower arm, the twist bone moves with it. I'll select the lower arm and hide it because it makes selecting this twist bone difficult. And next, I want to set a constraint on this twist bone that will make it rotate based on the rotation of the hand. So let's select the hand, shift select the twist bone, press Ctrl Shift C. Again, this means that the constraint will go on the last selected bone and the first selected bone will become the target or the controller of the constraint bone. Can you find a constraint that may help us do what we want to do? Well, there is one called copy rotation. And that is what we want. Before we click on it, let's look at this list of constraints. It is quite a list and it may look intimidating, but we can simplify it. For example, the constraints on the left under motion tracking, we will not use for rigging. You already learned inverse kinematics, as well as copy location, and we are about to use copy rotation. And copy location, copy rotation, and copy scale are constraints that you'll be using a lot. And we'll also add dumped track and copy transforms to this list of common constraints. The rest of the constraints are also powerful and useful, and we'll learn more about them, but ignore them for now, and this should take a big feeling of weight off your shoulders. Now choose copy rotation, and the constraint bone moved slightly. If I go to the constraints, I can click on this eye icon to enable and disable the constraint, and you can see the effect. And the reason for this offset is because of the target and owner orientations. By default, they're set to world space and world space, which means that the orientation of this constraint bone copies the orientation of the target bone exactly as they appear in the viewport. If you look at the options for target and owner, you'll see that there are a bunch of options, and again, this can seem very overwhelming. But here is another simplification that you're going to love. 95% of the time, you will either use world space and world space, or local space and local space. And only in rare cases, you will use other combinations of target and owner orientations. Let's switch target to local space and owner to local space. And now our constrained bone will no longer be offset because it copies the local rotation of the hand bone. Since the hand is currently in its rest pose, the twist bone also stays in its default rest pose. But when I start rotating the hand bone now, the twist bone will rotate just like it because it is copying its rotation. If I only rotate the hand on the y-axis, This is the exact effect we are looking for. But the problem is that the twist bone rotates with the hand bone on all axes. So select the twist bone, and in the copy rotation options, we have axis. The twist axis is the y-axis, so if we just disable X and Z, and then rotate the hand, then the twist bone only twists with the hand, and it doesn't copy its other axis. Now, you can take this as the solution. However, if I double tap R and rotate the hand at an extreme angle, you'll see a flipping of the twist bone. This only happens at extreme rotations. So if it doesn't bother you, you can keep it like this and you will have a very simple solution. But let's try to fix it and learn some useful fundamentals. And as for why it flips, these are mathematical problems in rigging that probably only developers understand fully. As a rigger, you mainly just accept them and learn to avoid them. And so to improve this, I'm going to select the hand and shift select the twist, press Ctrl-Shift-C and use a dump truck constraint. As I mentioned, this is a very commonly used constraint. Nothing seems to happen because the effect of dump truck is to make the constraint bone point at the target bone, which it already is, so seemingly nothing changes. If I select the hand and double tap R and try to find this flipping of the twist bone, it still happens. So at the flip state, I'm going to select the twist bone and enable the X and Z axis, and this gives us a stable solution that does not flip easily. An important property of constraints is that they are stacked on top of each other. Just like mesh modifiers, the constraint stack is evaluated from top to bottom, which means that the lower constraints will override the ones above them if they affect the same type of transform. Both copy rotation and dump truck affect the rotation of the bone, and so this copy rotation constraint makes the twist bone copy all rotation of the hand. Then dump truck on top of it overrides copy rotation and makes the twist bone always point at the hand bone. But a nice property of dump truck is that it doesn't influence the Y rotation value of a bone. It's just how it works. So the Y rotation from copy rotation is not overridden. In effect, the twist bone rotates with the hand bone only on the y-axis, which is exactly what we wanted. Let's clear the rotation and press Alt-H. Now our mechanism is in place. We just have to apply weights for the twist bone. So I'm going to go to Object Mode, select the body, Shift select the rig, Ctrl-P, and Automatic Weights. Now when you test it, you may feel disappointed by the result. Don't worry, we're going to fix it. I'll go to Object Mode, select my rig, Shift select the body, and go to Weight Paint mode. And part of the problem has to do with weights. Automatic weights is applied based on the size of the bone, and so this big lower arm bone has a lot of influence over the whole area. So Alt and click on the twist bone. I'll set my weight paint settings like in level 1, brush to add, strength to 0.2 or so, enable auto normalize under options, and this character is perfectly symmetrical, so I'll have the mirror options enabled. Now I'm going to click in this area. I'll paint this part of the lower arm fully red like this, and then shift and click in the middle to create a softer transition. We still lose plenty of volume in the middle of this lower arm. One twist bone is simply not enough, so in level 3 we'll do more complicated setup with multiple twist bones. But there is a solution that will work for a single bone. I'll go to Object Mode, select the body, go to Modifiers, and find the armature modifier, which was added automatically when we set automatic weights. And I'm going to enable the Preserve Volume option. And like magic, our arm looks perfect now. And you may be excited and see this as a magic button. And yes, it is awesome, but check this out. I'll go to my rig pose mode and raise the arm. And notice this bulge here. That is caused by the Preserve Volume option. But that's okay, we'll keep it on and I'll show you how to fix this, and this is something that even advanced users don't know, so look forward to it. Okay, the wrist was the toughest mechanism to build. We had to learn some new ideas, but it gets easier from here. Next we're going to work on the shoulder, so let's see what the problem is. The problem is quite similar to the wrist. If I select the upper arm and rotate it on the y-axis, we'll get some unwanted deformation in the shoulder. Now, this is almost solved by the preserve volume option. You'll see it gets much worse without it. So it depends on the character. Sometimes with simple characters, just using preserve volume may solve the whole problem. Generally, the thicker the character is, the more we need additional bones. So let's do it for practice. I'll enable overlays, go to pose mode, and reset my pose. Anatomically, the shoulder or deltoid muscle is attached to the clavicle and scapula, and so it doesn't twist much with the actual upper arm bone. Make sure to observe your own arm. For this setup, again, we need a shorter bone perfectly aligned with the upper arm bone. So again, we can go to edit mode, select the upper arm bone, Shift D, duplicate it, right click to cancel the movement, right click to subdivide, give it 2 cuts so that we get 3 bones, hide the big bone, select these bones that we don't need, delete them, name this bone upper arm twist.L, and Alt-H to unhide all bones. And so the goal of our setup will be to create a bone inside the shoulder area which moves and rotates with the upper arm, but it doesn't twist with it. In other words, it doesn't follow its Y rotation. So first I want to figure out the parenting of this new bone. If I parent it to the upper arm, that will make it move with the upper arm, but we want the twist bone to ignore the Y rotation of the upper arm. So if I parent them, I would have to come up with some mechanism to counter-rotate this small bone. I think there are easier solutions. Instead of parenting the twist bone to the upper arm, I'm going to parent it to the shoulder bone, because it is the next closest bone, and we also want the twist bone to move along with the shoulder. It makes sense, so let's give it a try. Control P and keep offset will be grayed out because this bone is actually already parented to the shoulder because we duplicated it from the main upper arm bone. So parenting is done. So now if I rotate the shoulder, the upper arm and the twist rotate with it. Now I just want to automate this twist bone. And now again, we want the twist bone to follow the rotation of the arm, but ignore its Y rotation. Can you think of one of our main constraints that does that? Yes, that is dumped track. Dump track will make the constraint bone follow all rotation of the target bone except for the y-axis. So I could select my upper arm bone, which will become the target, and then shift select the twist bone, which will get the constraint, Control Shift C and choose dumped track. And now if I test it, it won't work. Why is that? Let's go to the constraint. Dump track makes the constraint bone point at the head of the target bone. So it is pointing to here, and that's why it doesn't move at all. It's already constantly pointing at that point. So we'll make it point at the tail of the target bone. So from here to here. And now we have the twist bone following the upper arm bone, but if I rotate on the y-axis, it stays completely stationary. And if you want the simplest solution possible, this is it. Now it's always good to poke holes in your rig and try to find problems. So I'll try rotating some of the bones and it looks good. If I try to move the upper arm, I'm actually able to move it, but the twist bone does not move with it. This is not something this rig is meant to do, but let's try to solve it anyway. What can we use to constrain this twist bone to move with the upper arm bone? It is copy location. So select the upper arm, shift select the twist bone, Control Shift C, copy location, and it's done. but the twist bone seems to lose its orientation for some reason. Let's select it and look at the stack of constraints. Dump track is above copy location, which means that it is evaluated first. So what happens is, if I disable copy location for a second, first dump track orients this twist bone towards the tail of the upper arm. Then on top of that, copy location is evaluated, which I can simulate by enabling the constraint. So now the twist bone moved to the location of the upper arm, but it kept the exact orientation from the previous constraint. To fix this, all we need to do is move copy location above dump track. Now copy location is evaluated first, so the twist bone will always move along with the upper arm, and then on top of that, it will evaluate the dump track, which will point it towards the tail of the upper arm. And that is the exact behavior we were aiming at. So I'll select the upper arm and press Alt-R and Alt-G to clear location and rotation, and we can call these mechanisms done. I hope you see how there is a lot we can achieve with just this subset of constraints. Now I have to symmetrize the twist bones. So go to Edit Mode, select the twists, deselect anything else, right-click, Symmetrize, and back in pose mode we'll have twist bones on both sides. I also want to apply weights to make the shoulder twist take effect. So I'll go to Object Mode, select the body, Shift select the rig, Control P, automatic weights. And by the way, this will reset the custom weights that we painted here for the lower arm, but that's okay because we'll have a focused weight painting session in one of the next videos. Now I'll test the shoulder and it's looking good. To really make it work, I'll have to do some weight painting. But you don't need to follow along here because we will most likely reset these weights anyway, and as I said, we'll do the actual weight painting in a special weight painting video. Good work! Take your time here and make sure that you understand the constraints that we used. Copy location, copy rotation, and dump track, and also why we used them to the best of your ability. In the next video, we'll create 2 more mechanisms. The hips control is going to be super easy. The foot setup looks complex, but really it's just a bunch of parented bones. Creating this mechanism will help you understand bone parenting better. When you're ready, let's move on. In this video, we aim to level up our ability to create rig mechanisms even further. And the next mechanism we'll work on is a hips control. Currently, we have a spine that consists of these 3 bones going in the same direction. And that's okay, but it is a bit simplistic. One thing that this rig cannot do is isolated hip movement, which is very common and very easy for humans to do. So we need to address this. For now, I want to give you the simplest solution that is easy to implement, but also quite useful and powerful. So this is our hips bone, and currently it rotates here from the bottom of the pelvis. We kind of want it to rotate from here. And that is easy to do. If I just had the thick part of the bone here instead of here, that would give me the basic behavior. And in edit mode, if I select this bone and press Alt-F, that is exactly what I get. Alt-F flips the bone. If you go to the armature menu in edit mode, you should find it under switch direction. Flipping the bone like this may change the hierarchy or the parenting, so let's see what we get. Now, this bone is completely disconnected, but the good news is we got the pivot point that we wanted. So in edit mode, let's parent the legs back to this bone. And now we have the basic hips rotation. And the rest of the spine can rotate on its own. But occasionally, we may want to move or rotate the entire spine, so we would have to select these 2 bones and move them together. That's not ideal. And in the spirit of giving you the simplest possible solution, I'll go to edit mode, select one of these points, press E then Y to extrude a new bone, I'll rename it to torso and parent the hips bone and the first spine bone to the new torso bone. Now I have this torso bone, which can move and rotate the whole spine, but I also have my separate hips bone and my individual spine bones. This torso bone doesn't need to be exactly here. It kind of becomes the center of gravity of the character, so you can move it up or down and it will depend on your individual character. I'm going to place it around here in the hips area. And that is it for the spine. It wasn't too bad, right? So we are on a roll, so we'll be working on the foot roll mechanism. Pun was not intended. Currently, we only have this control for the foot. That is the IK control. It moves the whole leg, it rotates the foot. It is very useful. But occasionally we may want to rotate the foot from the tip of the toes, or lift the foot without lifting the toes. There are a million ways to create a foot rig, but I'm going to show you a solution that is relatively easy to make, it's logical, and it gives you plenty of control. And most importantly, it will teach you important rigging concepts. If I have this bone selected and shift and right click to place the 3D cursor here at the end of the foot, and then switch my pivot point to 3D cursor, you'll see that we kind of get this rotation from the end of the foot. And if I place it here at the toes, we can raise the foot from the toes. But just using the 3D cursor is not ideal. Again, it creates a mess with the animation curves. So let's try to find a better solution. What we need is to give the IK target additional pivot points somehow. Try this. Go to edit mode, create a new bone, and place it somewhere near the foot. Parent the IK target to that bone. Go to pose mode. Let's switch our pivot to something like individual origins so that we actually rotate this bone on its pivot point, which again is the thick part of the bone. So this pivot point became a new pivot point for the IK. If I go to edit mode, move it a little bit towards the toes, and go to pose mode, it will rotate from the toes or from the heels. What I want for this foot setup is to be able to rotate the foot from the ball of the foot, the tip of the toes, and from the heel. So I could create 3 bones exactly at these points and use them as pivot points. In edit mode, I'm going to delete this bone, select this point, which is exactly the ball of the foot, switch orientation to global, press E, then Z to extrude a bone straight up, and it is parented and connected. I'm going to press Alt P and clear the parent. And let's create one more at the tip of the toe. E, Z, select the bone, Alt P, clear parent. And from the side view, duplicate this bone and place it at the heel. So these are our pivot bones. Let's name them. This one will be heel pivot.L, ball pivot.L, and toe pivot.L. Okay, so now I want these bones to be my pivot points, so I need to parent the IK targets to them. But a bone can have only one parent. I can parent the IK target either to this bone, or to this bone, or to this bone, but not to all of them. But we can create a chain of parents, or nested parenting. It should be fairly intuitive to understand, but just in case, let me try to explain it in more detail. In Blender, parenting is not on a single level. I can parent this bone to this bone, and then parent this bone to the third bone. Now the first bone is parented to the second bone, and the second bone is parented to the third bone. And the parenting propagates up, which means that this bone is parent of all of the bones, and technically this bone is its child and this one is its grandchild. I don't really use these terms, but if it helps you, that's cool. Another way to visualize this is to go to your outliner expand the armature details, expand pose, and then you'll see your bones in a hierarchy. And if I select this top bone, it is our topmost parent, and then our second parent, and then we have the final bone that is just a child of the other ones. So parenting can be nested, and we are using this to our advantage. Back to our rig. Okay, so we could chain the parents like this. The IK target will be parented to the ball pivot. The ball pivot will be parented to the toe pivot, and the toe pivot will be parented to the heel pivot. So the hierarchy will be the heel at the top, the toe second, the ball third, and the IK target at the bottom, so that it is controlled by all of the pivots. So I'll parent the IK target to the ball pivot, the ball pivot to the toe pivot, and toe pivot to heel pivot. Let's go to pose mode and test it. If I rotate this bone, it pivots from the heel, this one from the toes, and this one from the ball of the foot. And this is nice, but what happens when I move the original IK target? It still works, but our pivot bones do not move with it. That means the pivots will not work as intended. I'll reset the pose. So what can we do about this? Well, we could add one more pivot bone exactly where the IK target is, and make this new pivot the top of the foot hierarchy, so that all other pivots and the IK target will move with it. Let's go to edit mode, and the easiest way to create a bone exactly where the IK target is to make a copy of the IK target. With individual origins, I'm going to scale this bone up a little bit, and the original IK target down a little bit. The size of these control bones does not really matter. All that matters is their pivot point. We only change the size so that we can distinguish between the two bones. If they're the same size, you cannot even tell that there are two bones there. Now, I want this new bone to become the top of this hierarchy. In pose mode, we can see that the current top of the hierarchy is the heel bone. So if I parented this heel bone to the new bone, then the new bone should become the top of the hierarchy. Would you agree? Let's try it. Control P, keep offset. Now let's go to pose mode and see what happens. If I move this bone, I expect it to move the whole foot with it. But that is not what happens. This confused me a lot while recording the tutorial, and I even had to start over a couple of times to make sense of it. And if you experience such an issue as a beginner, I think it might confuse you quite a bit. That's why I am including it here. First, let's see what actually happened. I duplicated this bone from the IK target bone, so it kept the parenting. It was parented to the ball, which itself is parented to the toe. And the toe is parented to the heel. So when I parented the heel to the new bone, instead of moving the new bone to the top of the hierarchy, the heel moved to the bottom of the hierarchy. I guess that makes sense too. Even if you didn't understand this whole thing perfectly, here are some key takeaways. 1. Sometimes Blender will not do exactly what you expect it to do. And 2. Getting confused is normal. It also happens to advanced users. So this is normal, it's part of rigging. What you do is you take a deep breath and start looking for the problem. Obviously something happened to the parenting, so let's just do the parenting again from the start and see what happens. I'll parent the original IK bone to the toe. And by the way, when bones are overlapping, you may have to click a couple of times to get the right bone. Or you can Alt and click, and that will give you a list of all bones under your cursor. So I want to parent this to the ball. Control P, keep offset is grayed out, so that means it's already parented. So this bone is good. Now let's parent the ball to the toe. Control P, and again it's grayed out. And then the toe to the heel, Control P. Okay, here we can reparent things. And now I'm going to parent the heel to the new bone. It is grayed out, so it's already parented. Okay, not working again. So let's go to edit mode, select all of these bones, press Alt P and clear the parent. And now do the parenting one by one. Ball to toe, toe to heel, and heel to the new IK bone. Finally it works. So we have this new pivot from the ankle, so that gives us the regular IK behavior. Then we have a pivot from the ball of the foot, from the toes, and from the heel. Perfect. Well, almost perfect. When I pivot from the ball, I expect the toe to stay straight. So what can we do about this? Clear the pose. Any ideas how we could accomplish this using some of our base constraints? There are different ways to do it, but I found that I can do this with just one constraint. If I select the toe pivot, shift select the toe itself, and Control-Shift-C and give it a dumped track constraint. This makes the toe always point at the toe pivot. And so when I rotate the ball pivot, the toe will stay straight. Now, one thing we lost here is the ability to rotate the toe freely, which is not great, but this is easy to fix, and it is a very important rigging technique. We could call this the constraint plus child technique. When you have a bone that is constrained, and you want to keep this automation from the constraint, but you also want to enable the bone to move freely, you just create a copy of this bone and parent it to the constraint bone. So we get the automation from the constraint, and on top of that, you can move your parented bone any way you like. Let's do it. I'll go to edit mode, select the toe, press Shift D and duplicate it. And so this copy will stay automated or constrained, and the original toe bone will be free. Automated bones that we don't manually animate are often given the prefix MCH, which stands for mechanism. Let's press F2 and name this bone MCH-toe L and delete the 001. Now let's alt-click and select the original toe and make it a little bit smaller, again to distinguish it, and parent it to the MCH toe. In pose mode, the original toe still has the constraint, so we're still unable to rotate it, but if I remove dump track, I can move it freely. And because it is parented to the constraint bone, it will move with it, so we still have our automation. Okay, this foot setup is basically finished. We just need to name some bones. For example, this new IK target, I'm going to press F2 and name ankle pivot.L. I think this name makes the most sense, and it should help you understand that this whole foot setup is just the IK target parented in sequence to a bunch of pivot bones. The original IK target itself can still be moved, but it shouldn't be because it produces these kind of weird results. So this IK target has also become an MCH bone because it is necessary for the rig to work, but it should not be animated manually. So let's name it MCH-leg IK target.L. And something else we can do to MCH bones is to select them, press M, create a new collection, call it MCH. Then I'll select the MCH toe and also press M and move it to the new MCH collection. If I go to the armature tab, I can hide these MCH bones, so it would be less likely for the animator to animate them by mistake. Now I'm going to unhide them because I still want to symmetrize this setup. Let's go to edit mode. And now if I deselect everything first and then select all of these bones that I worked on, right click and symmetrize, that should symmetrize the setup perfectly. Let's test it. And it did not. That is most likely because we changed some of the names of the bones. So here is what I recommend. Go to edit mode, click away so that you deselect everything, and then carefully select all of the bones on the right leg. Make sure X symmetry is off. Delete the whole right leg. Select the whole left leg, right click and symmetrize. Now it looks good. Now I could hide the MCH bones. Well, you just completed the most difficult part of the novice section. If something is still a bit fuzzy, do not rush forward. I would recommend going back and trying to understand it. Feel free to ask questions as well. Whenever you're ready, let's move on. In the next video, we'll go deeper into bone shapes and our rig will look really professional. Then you'll learn even more about weight painting in a dedicated weight painting video. We'll go over some important rigging concepts and you'll be ready for the final novice challenge, face rigging. You could say that the toughest part in the novice section is behind us. In this video, we'll have some fun making this rig cool and easy to use. Okay, let's turn off these axes. Right now they're not useful to us, they're just distracting, so go to the Armature tab, Viewport Display and disable axes. And now we'll be organizing the rig, which means creating bone collections, which are also found under the Armature tab. And while we are here, take a look at the pose options. We have pose position and rest position. So pose position is the default mode, which means that you can pose and animate your rig. So let's give it a quick pose. And rest position will bring the rig into its default position, which is exactly the same thing that we get in edit mode. This can be useful while performing some rigging operations, but the main reason to mention it here is that in this mode I'm unable to move, rotate and scale the bones. I'll get this message saying cannot change pose when rest position is enabled. So if you get something like this, just switch back to pose position and you'll be able to pose your character again. And one more reason, your rig may not be moving as you expect it to move. In the end panel, under Tool, there is this Location option. If I enable it, I can move the bone, but if I try to rotate or scale it, it won't react. Sometimes you may enable this option by mistake and wonder why your bones are not rotating. So turn off locations and your rig will start behaving normally. Back to bone collections. In the previous video, we created the MCH collection. So let's see if we have other bones that belong there. Can you find any? The wrist twist is an MCH bone. It creates an automation and it's not supposed to be animated manually. So let's press F2 and name it MCH-lower arm twist.L. And let's do the same for the right one. And what about the shoulder twist? You could make it MCH, but you may want to tweak this bone manually from time to time. For this character, the twisting should work almost perfectly, but if you don't like it at any point, just select your twist bone and you can rotate it manually. Even though it is constrained, the dump track ignores the y-axis, so we can still rotate this bone manually. So I'm going to keep this bone as a control. So let's select the wrist twist and move it to the MCH collection. Same for the right one. And that is it for the MCH collection. Other than mechanisms, bones can be used for controls or for deforming the character. So let's go to our bone collections. And I'm going to rename the default bones collection to controls and press the plus button and name the new collection deform. I'll unhide MCH because some of my MCH bones may also be deforming. For example, the wrist twist is like that. Speaking of which, I think I forgot to make this MCH toe non-deforming. Yep. I have to disable deform for these bones. And now let's see which bones are deforming bones. These are mostly the bones that we created initially for our base armature. So here the original toe bone, the foot bone, the shin bone, the upper leg, the hips, the spine, the chest, the shoulder, the upper arm, the lower arm, as well as the twist bones, the hand, and all of the fingers. And also the neck and the head. I only selected the left side because I can go to select, select mirror, and from the options down here, choose extend so that my initial selection is kept. Now I have all deforming bones selected. So now if I press M and move them to the deform collection, that will move the MCH wrist bones away from the MCH collection. So instead, we're going to press Shift M, which means that we'll keep the bones on their current collections, but we'll also add them to another collection. And I'm going to choose deform. So my MCH bones are all organized, so I'll hide the collection. And now the control collection has a lot of bones that don't belong there. All bones that are just deforming and not supposed to be animated, I'm going to exclude from this collection. So the shin, the upper leg, and the foot is also not controlled because I am controlling it with this IK target bone. Let's select the same bones on the right side as well. And then to remove them from the controls collection, there are a couple of ways. I can go to bone collections, highlight controls and click remove. And another one, if I just undo, I can press Shift M and click the controls collection. It has a minus sign next to it. So that means that I'll be removing these bones from the collection. Now, if I hide the deform collection, these leg bones disappeared because they're not controls. And currently only my controls collection is visible. And I think this should be it. All of these bones are supposed to be control bones. If I hide controls and unhide deforms, I'll only see my deform bones. And if I hide deform and unhide MCH, I'll only see the MCH bones. This rig is not that complicated, so you can get away without organizing the bones, but the more complex the rig, the more important organization becomes. Next, we are going to be creating the shapes for the controls, so let me hide the MCH bones and unhide the controls. Then go to object mode and let's create our shapes. We'll make much nicer controls than in level 1. In level 1, we just use circles. That is boring, we can do better. So in object mode, press Shift A, mesh, and choose circle. And I'm going to give it 16 vertices just to make it a little bit simpler. A circle is a shape that you will always need. Then again, Shift A and add a cube. Go to edit mode for this cube, select everything, press X and choose only faces. And that gives us a wireframe of a cube because we usually just use wireframes for shapes. Next, in object mode, I'll create a UV sphere, segments to 16 and rings to 8. Go to edit mode and select the central loops. Press Ctrl I, X and delete vertices. And that gives us a wireframe of a sphere. By the way, these shapes are not in the center of the world. Also, they may look pretty big, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. Because when we apply the shapes to the bones, their pivot point matches the pivot point of the bone, and also the size of the shape changes based on the size of the bone. On top of that, we have nice tools to tweak the size and orientation of the shape, so no need to worry about this. I can even move these shapes around, it really won't matter much. So next shape I'll create a plane, go to edit mode, select it all, press R, then Z, then 45, delete faces. Then I'll grab these edges, move them up a little bit, select everything, Control Shift B, and bevel these edges. And that gives me this curvy shape. And once again, I'll create a plane, go to edit mode, delete only faces, select everything, squash it on the x-axis, and then Control Shift B and bevel it a little bit. And one last shape that I use specifically for the shoulders. Same thing, plane, delete the faces, squash it a bit, subdivide the edges, move these vertices up a bit, Control Shift B to bevel them, and then select these vertices, Control Shift B to bevel them a bit as well. Okay, now let's name our shapes. These shapes are often called widgets, and we abbreviate that to WGT-. So this will be WGT cube, WGT sphere, WGT circle, WGT, I guess I'll call this curvy, WGT shoulder, and this shape I'll call WGT rectangle. I'll select all of these shapes, press M to move them to a new collection. Call the collection WGTS. And I can hide the widgets. Now go to the rig, go to pose mode, and let's start setting up these shapes. I'll start from the leg. Let's set up the ankle pivot. I'll go to the bone tab, viewport display, custom bone shape, and start typing WGT. And I'll make this a rectangle. This looks a bit weird now, but if I move this shape, you can hold Shift to make this movement more gradual. I can place this shape exactly at the base of the foot. And even though the point of rotation of this control is here, placing it like this makes it so intuitive. This is the foot control and it's very obvious. Next, I'm going to give this bone the sphere shape. I want to make it smaller. And by the way, you can click and drag down to select all of these scale options and then hold Shift to make the scaling gradual and scale down your shape. Now I'll select all of the other pivots, Shift select this one, right click on the custom shape, copy to selected, and then right click on the scale, copy all to selected. Then select this shape and I'm going to move it up a little bit. The idea is that even when I disable in front, this shape will be visible. And this gives me a very minimalistic look. Next, the toe. I'll make it a circle, rotate it a bit. And it looks good to me. Then I can go to edit mode, select all of these bones, only on the left side, right click, symmetrize, and all of these shapes will be symmetrized. And I also want to give the pole target a sphere shape. Scale it down, edit mode, right click, symmetrize. Then for the spine bones, I'm going to use the curvy shape. Select all other spine bones, shift select the hips, right click, copy to selected, right click on rotation, copy all to selected, and then play with the size and orientation a little bit more. So the reason I use this curvy shape is because it has a little bit of direction, which makes it more obvious that this hips rotates differently from the spine bone. For the torso bone, I'm going to use WGT cube. I'll use scale and translation to shape it exactly as I want. For the neck, I'll use a circle. Copy the shape to the head. For this shoulder, I'll use the special shoulder widget that I created. I just need to orient it and position it the way I like. And that will give me an intuitive shoulder control. I'll select the entire arm, set the circle shape, right-click, copy to selected, rotate and right-click, copy all to selected, and then optimize the shape of each widget. For this twist bone, I guess I'll use the curvy shape. And for the fingers, I'll just select all of them. I'll set the sphere widget. right click, copy to select it, tweak the size a little bit, right click, copy all to select it, and I'll call this good. You can certainly create a nicer shape for the fingers. That is up to you. Creating your shapes can be very time consuming, but it can be worth it. Now in edit mode, select the entire left arm, right click, symmetrize, and we'll have the same shapes on the right side. Now let's set bone colors, very similar to what we did in level 1. Select all bones on the left side, give them the red color, and apply to all with this button. Select mirror without extend, and now we have the right bones selected, give them blue color, and apply to all. Select all spine and head and neck bones, give them the yellow color. For the torso, I'm going to use a special green color. And one control we did not create in the previous video is a root control. It is a good idea to have it, so let's go to edit mode, Shift S, cursor to world origin, so that my bone will appear exactly at the center, and then Shift A to create a new bone, press F2 and name it root. From the side view, switch to individual origins, press R and type 90 on the numpad. Or you could use the rotate gizmo, hold Control and rotate until the bone is flat on the ground, and then scale it down a bit. If we enable axis for a second, we can also play with the axis position to set where the axis is displayed. And now that I see my axis, you'll see that it matches the world orientation exactly. This is called a world-oriented bone, and the root should ideally be world-oriented. Again, this has to do with the animation curves that this bone will produce. If we have it world-oriented, that means that Z will mean moving up, and Y will mean moving front and back, and X sideways. Very easy to follow and understand. Now I'm trying to determine which bones need to be parented to the root, and I believe that should be the torso bone and the two ankle controls. So select them, shift select the root, Control P, keep offset, and now this root will move everything with it. Let's unhide our widgets and select the widget collection. Create a new circle shape with 24 vertices. Select 4 vertices like this, switch to bounding box center, press S to scale up, and that will create these arrow-like shapes. Let's call this WGT root. Hide the widgets, go to the rig, select this root bone, give it the root widget, and it is shaped and oriented perfectly. I'll just give it a special purple color. And that's it. Our rig is nice and pretty. One final cool trick that you can do, this is kind of new in Blender 4.2. We have a new wire width setting, which can make your shape's wire thicker and therefore easier to notice. So let's set it to 2. Press A to select all other shapes. Right click, copy to select it. Then go to the Armature tab, disable axis and in front. And now we have a rig that looks really professional, with nice clean shapes that are intuitive and easy to select. Awesome work so far. This rig is ready to rock. The only problem that we still have is that we've been avoiding weight painting until now. And so the next chapter will be all about that. In level 1, I gave you some basics for weight painting, which are great. But in the next video, again, we'll just go deeper into the options so that you don't just know where to click, but why you're clicking and what is really happening. This is the difference between a beginner and someone who aspires to go to higher levels in rigging. In this video, we'll focus on the weight painting of the character. In level 1, I already gave you the basic recipe for weight painting. select your rig in object mode, shift select your character. My character consists of multiple meshes and we can only weight paint one at a time, so I'll shift select the body and then we can go to weight paint mode. Now I'm in weight paint mode, but because I selected the rig as well, the bones are available, so I can alt click on a bone and that selects the bone and activates the vertex group. So I can pose my character while painting. To set my weight paint options, I expand the amp panel, I go to tool, I set my brush to add, strength to about 0.2, then go to options and definitely enable auto normalize. On the symmetry, if your character is symmetrical, enable mirror vertex groups and the X option. If it's not symmetrical, then disable both options. And then you'll have to paint the left side and the right side individually. My character is symmetrical, so I'll enable both. And under advanced, if front faces only is enabled, disable it. This will make it easier to paint overlapping geometry. I recommend that you memorize these options or write them down, because this is how I weight paint 90% of the time and it works really well. But as I said multiple times, my goal at the novice level is to help you gain a better understanding of rigging and not just tell you where to click. I know weight paint is a major area that trips people up, so let's dive deeper into it. So my character is already parented to this armature with automatic weights. Now I'm going to undo automatic weights, and that will give you a better understanding of what happens when you click automatic weights. You cannot undo automatic weights in a single click because it does a couple of things at the same time. First, I'll select all of my objects, press Alt-P and clear parent. Then I'll select any of my meshes, go to modifiers, and if there is an armature modifier, I should delete it. Sometimes unparenting removes the armature modifier, but sometimes it doesn't, so check your meshes. And finally, I have to select my meshes, go to data properties, and I'll find the vertex groups. Vertex groups connect the vertices of the mesh to bones in your rig. And so to completely undo automatic weights, I also have to delete all vertex groups, which can be done from this menu, delete all groups. I'll do it for all objects. Now my meshes are fully unparented from the rig. Before we parent again and start weight painting, let's go to the rig, pose mode, and check if all deforming bones have the deform option and all non-deforming bones have it disabled. I placed all of my deforming bones on the deform collection, so I'll unhide it, select all bones, and I can enable in front. All of these bones need to be deforming. Some of them look like bones and others like shapes, because in this rig we use certain bones for both deformation and control. In more advanced rigs, you're going to start separating your deform bones and your control bones. But for this level, I decided that this creates too much complexity, so we are skipping it here. The important part to understand here is that even though some of these bones look like shapes, they're still deform bones. So they have the deform option enabled. Okay, now we have all of our deforming bones enabled, and if I want to make sure that all of them are deforming, I can of course go to the bone tab and enable the deform option, but we can also go to pose, bone settings, deform, and set type to enable. Now all of these selected bones will be deforming bones. Click away to deselect all bones and go to the armature tab. Then in bone collections, hide deform bones and unhide controls. Again, on this collection, we have both deforming bones and controls, so we have to be a little bit careful to select only the controls and remove the deforming option from them. If I select the root, for example, I totally forgot to remove its deform option. That is why I'm doing this check. And on my toe pivot, I can also see that it has the deform option. I could almost swear that I removed it, but I guess I didn't. So let's select the root and then shift select the main foot control, all pivot bones, skip the circle, it's the toe and it's a deforming bone. Then shift select this pole target. The torso control is only a control. And that is it. All other bones are deforming bones. With these bones selected, go to select, select mirror, and enable extend. That will select the same bones on the right side as well. And then go to pose, bone settings, deform, and type will be disabled. So all of these bones will now have the deform option disabled. Let me just check my MCH bones. The MCH twist bones are deforming, but they're supposed to be deforming, so that's good. So I'll switch to my controls and go to object mode. Now I'm sure that all bones that need to be deforming are deforming, and control and MCH bones are non-deforming. So I can do automatic weights again, and I'll be sure that only the deformed bones will actually deform the mesh. I'll select all objects, shift select the armature to make sure that it's the active object, press Ctrl P, and I'll choose automatic weights. In the outliner, notice how all of my objects disappeared. That is because they became children of the armature object. So they were parented to the armature object. Also, if I select any mesh that I just parented with automatic weights, it will have an armature modifier. The object is set to armature, which is my rig, which means that this mesh will be deformed by that armature. In the previous videos, I also enabled preserve volume, so I'll enable it again. That is specifically for the body. All of the other meshes will not have preserve volume on their armature modifier. And finally, automatic weights edit vertex groups for each deforming bone. So these are perfectly clean vertex groups, meaning that we only have vertex groups that correspond to deforming bones. So by undoing automatic weights and doing it again, I hope you understand what actually happens when you press automatic weights. This is something that even some advanced users miss, and that's why they may stay stuck in the valley of the suck, even though they have some advanced knowledge. Fundamentals are king. Okay, we can finally weight paint, so I'll select my rig and I'll unhide the deformed bones. Then shift select the mesh that I want to weight paint. The main one is the body, and then go to weight paint mode. And now again, I can alt click or alternatively Control Shift click on bones to activate the vertex groups. My auto normalize, symmetry, and brush settings are all set, so I'm ready to paint. And here, please allow me one more edit of the interface. I'll go to Edit Preferences, Key Map, and also enable Extra Shading Pie Menu items. When I enable this, I can just press Z and control my shading options perfectly from this pie menu. I can go to Material Preview, Solid, Wireframe, and Rendered, and I can also toggle Overlays, which is this button here normally. And I can turn X-ray on and off, which is the same as pressing this button. Here it doesn't do much because we still have the in-front option. So if I disable it and then go to pose mode, then toggling the X-ray option will make the bones see-through or not. Okay, let's go to weight paint mode. And the first thing I want to test is the wrist deformation. And it looks mostly nice. I'll toggle X-ray so that I can see this bone inside, and then alt click it and shift and click to soften these weights a little bit. And then control click at the wrist to remove weights for the main bone from the wrist. And this looks good to me. This is probably one of the most important areas. The arm deforms too much of the upper body. So I need to control and click in the upper body, but these low weights in the body are very hard to see. So in your shading options, expand the special weight paint settings, and for zero weights, enable active. This will make the parts of the mesh that are not affected by this bone at all completely black. So now I can see the low weights here in the body, and I can remove them. And also alt and click on the twist bone and remove any weights from the body. Now we have a very nice deformation. I'm going to Alt and click on the body bone and paint even stronger weights here. Then Shift and click here at the armpit. And that should create very nice deformation in the armpit. For the shoulder, I'm going to remove weights by Control and clicking so that the weights are only on the shoulder. I'll pay special attention to remove weights from the collar. And also this chest bone affects the collar, which will become a problem, so remove weights from it. So now this part of the mesh is getting really nice, so let's move on. Another problematic area is the hips or the crotch. Activate the hips bone, and before we paint, if I Alt and click on the torso bone, you'll see the whole mesh turn purple. This simply means that there is no vertex group associated with this bone, because this bone is just a control. So this is not a problem at all, and if you click on the mesh by accident, it will create a vertex group. Because this bone is not deforming, that is not a problem. This vertex group will simply do nothing. But personally, if that happens, I like to press Ctrl Z and undo so that there is no vertex group for this control. Now let's activate the hips. Control and click in this area to remove weights. And here is what I like to do for the hips. I'll make my brush smaller and start clicking and paint something like red pants in this area, including the crotch. And then on the backside, I'll also create this pants-like paint, and I'll paint on the butt quite a lot. Let's activate the foot control and move it to see what kind of deformations we get. So by painting these pants, we are getting something very nice. I need to shift click in this area just between the hips and the leg. And that will improve the deformation between the two areas even more. Now I activated the thigh, and I'm going to Control click to remove all influence from the body. And then Shift and click on the transition area, and I can remove overlays to see things better, and keep shift clicking. And you'll see how this area becomes very acceptable. Now here we have this bulging, which, as I said, is because of the preserve volume modifier, and we are going to fix this in the next video. It's an important technique. So I'm going to shift click here in this area just to smooth these weights a little bit. Smoothing is very important to create nice transition between the bones, but don't overdo it, because soft weights produce soft deformation, and that can look weird as well. In general, having your weights a little bit harder, which creates intersection between the geometry, is better than having too smooth weights, which fixes the intersections but creates wishy-washy deformations. I'll smooth this area a little bit and test it by rotating the body. I painted a little bit more weights for the spine. And this is starting to look really good. One area that almost always needs attention is the heel. So activate the foot vertex group and paint weights in the heel so that it's perfectly red. Here I'm tweaking the toe groups a little bit, but they're mostly okay. The character's body is in a good shape, so I'm going to call it done. We can do more painting on it, but I cannot show you any technique that I haven't shown you already. Here is a little secret that most people don't know or they don't want to accept. Once you know the basic weight paint workflow, weight painting is just a lot of clicking. Pose your character, notice deformation problems, then add, remove, and smooth weights. There is really no magic to it, just clicking, control clicking, and shift clicking. So next I'm going to focus on some areas that deserve special attention. Let's go to object mode, select the rig, shift select the face, and go to weight paint mode. Activate the head bone. And this always happens. The chin area needs more weights. Now, the weight paint options, weirdly, are saved per object, which means that the head can have different weight paint options than the body. So here I want to enable my mirror options for the head. And I'll control click on the neck and then shift click here to soften this transition a little bit. I'll remove any influence of the neck over the head and shift click a little bit. The neck deformation looks mostly okay. Maybe it deforms this area too much, but the collar and the neck move nicely together. That is because the neck is fully painted red for the neck bone. And if I go back to object mode, select my rig, shift select the body, go to weight paint mode and activate this vertex group, the collar is also fully painted red for the neck bone. Maybe this area needs to be painted a little bit stronger. And here I see something orange as well. And then I'll control click and remove influence from the body so that the neck does not affect the body, and then shift click a little bit to soften this transition, but I'll make sure that the top of the collar is completely red. And now we should have very nice transition. Maybe I'll control click here a little bit so that the neck doesn't deform this area. I'm just clicking, control clicking, and shift clicking to add, remove, or soften the weights. Okay, so this is almost perfect. We have teeth inside the head, and they should be controlled completely by the head. But it looks like they're controlled a little bit by the neck, and when I rotate this control, the teeth poke through the face. We can fix this by painting, by going to object mode, selecting the rig, then shift selecting the teeth, weight paint mode, alt click, activating the neck vertex group, and I can control and click on them and then activate the head and paint them fully red. But I'm going to undo to show you another technique. I can select the teeth, go to data, vertex groups, go to edit mode, select all vertices, and from this menu, choose remove from all groups. This will make it so all vertices are not affected by any vertex group. So the teeth will no longer be affected by any bone. Then again, go to edit mode, select all vertices, and find the head vertex group, select it, make sure that this weight value is set to 1, and click assign. Then go to object mode, and the teeth will jump into place. That is because we assign them fully to the head vertex group. Now, if you want a challenge, select the eyes and the eyelashes, and in any way you like, make sure that they are also assigned 100% to the head bone. Awesome job! And I want to emphasize again that you have learned enough weight painting techniques to paint almost any character. In level 3 of the course, you will learn more, especially about weight painting mechanical models, which you should already kinda be able to do if you paid good attention in this video. But just keep it simple. Remember our base settings, always use auto normalize, and then add, remove, or smooth the weights. That's about it. And now you're very close to graduating from the novice level. In the next video, we'll learn special techniques and modifiers. You will learn what I call the magic modifier when it comes to rigging. We'll touch on some theory that you're going to need in the future, especially if you want to reach intermediate and advanced stages of rigging. As always, we'll keep it nice, simple, and practical. Let's go. This is the last video in the NOVICE section before your final challenge, face rigging. In this video, we'll go over some important rigging techniques. We'll fix the problems caused by preserved volume, and we'll even talk about basic IK-FK switching. We'll also go over some theory, such as quaternions and Eulers. This may be a bit difficult at this stage, so it's okay not to understand it fully. The goal is to show you some basics, and we'll keep digging deeper at the intermediate level. First, let us fix the issues that we got from enabling the Preserve Volume option. As a reminder, we enabled the Preserve Volume option for the armature modifier on the main body, and we did so to fix the deformations in the arm. Without Preserve Volume, it looks like this. With Preserve Volume, it's much nicer. But because of Preserve Volume, we get bulging in certain parts of the rig. I think it's worst here. This is with and without Preserve Volume. This can be fixed. It's a slightly advanced technique, but if you just follow the steps, you can do it. Go to your modifiers, click Add Modifier, Deform, Armature. So we are adding one more armature modifier, and the object will be our rig, the armature object. So the first armature modifier has the Preserve Volume option, and the second does not have it. The mesh became very distorted. That is because the armature modifiers are added on top of each other, so any offset of the bones produces double deformations. That's okay. The armature modifier has a vertex group option, and that controls which part of the mesh will be deformed by this armature modifier. So we can use this to make only certain parts be controlled by the first modifier, which has Preserve Volume, and other parts will be controlled by the second modifier without Preserve Volume. Let's go to Data, create a new vertex group, call it Preserve or something like that. Go to Edit Mode for the main body mesh, select all vertices, set Weight to 1, and click Assign. Now we have all vertices assigned to this vertex group. Go to Object Mode, back to Modifiers, and set this vertex group for both armature modifiers. Then on the second armature modifier, enable this button, which means inverse. So now the first armature modifier controls all vertices through this vertex group. And the second armature modifier controls the inverse of that group, which currently means that it doesn't control anything. So we're kind of back to square one, but that will change right away. Go to your vertex groups, select the rig, shift select the body, go to Weight Paint mode, and now the Preserve vertex group is enabled. If it's not, just click on it and it will become enabled. Now, with our usual Weight Paint settings, make the brush a little bit smaller with F and control click in the bulging area. And it will start to look better. Also control click here. I'm also shift clicking to smooth the weights. And that's it, it's fixed. If you still don't understand why it works and you're curious, when we control click to lessen the effect of this vertex group, these weights are subtracted from the first armature modifier, and because the second armature modifier has the inverse of that group, they are automatically assigned to the second armature modifier. So the vertices that have full red weights are controlled by this modifier, and so Preserve Volume is applied to them. And the parts of the mesh with less weights are controlled by this modifier, which doesn't have Preserve Volume. After recording this, I realized that this setup works, but it has a drawback, and this happens often in rigging. And the only problem is if we decide to move the root, you'll see that these areas that we fixed are getting distorted. So here is what you need to do. Select your character, disable the Preserve group on the first modifier, disable the inversion on the second modifier, and then enable multi-modifier. That's all you need to do, and you'll have all of your fixed areas. And you can also move the root without any issues. And here is another modifier that you're going to love. Select your mesh, go to Add Modifier, Deform, and choose Smooth Corrective. And when it comes to rigging, I call this the magic modifier because you just apply it, and notice how everything just becomes better. The problem with this, and also with the preserve volume, is that these are Blender effects, so they are not exportable. But if you just work in Blender, they are absolutely awesome. And just one more quick note, if you have a subdivision modifier, make sure it is at the bottom of the stack. In recent versions of Blender, you can even pin this modifier so that it's always at the bottom. But that was just a note. I'm going to delete subdivision here. Now let's talk about IK a bit. We have the legs exclusively in IK and the arms exclusively in FK. If you want to make your arms IK, you could go to edit mode, and let's enable in front. Select this point, press EY to extrude the IK target, Alt-P, clear parent. Go to pose mode, select the new target, shift select the lower arm, Ctrl-Shift-C, inverse kinematics, set chain length to 2. We can also create a pole. Same as for the leg. I should also parent these new bones to the root bone. And now we have an IK mechanism for the arm. That should be easy for you by now. And the cool thing is, if I want to switch from IK to FK, I can just disable the IK modifier, which I can do by disabling the eye icon, or I can set influence to 0. And now this arm is usable in FK mode. So this is the easiest IK-FK switching mechanism. However, we cannot do this for the leg, for example, because if I set influence to 0 here, it will kind of work, but we have these constraints on the foot and toe, and they make the behavior of the foot and toe a little bit weird in FK mode. And that is why in level 3 intermediate rigging, we are going to create proper IK-FK switching. So I'm going to enable my IK leg again. And I'll actually delete all of these IK bones for the arm. And delete the IK modifier. It was just a quick demo to show you the easiest way to have both IK and FK, even if it's not a perfect way. Here is something else that gets quite advanced, but I want to point it out at this stage. I'll select my forearm and go to Item. And you'll see that my rotation is defined by W, X, Y, Z, and below it the mode is quaternion. If I click on this, we have quaternion and a couple of Euler variations and even axis angle. Axis angle you can pretty much ignore for now, but quaternion and Eulers are important. We won't go into the technical details for now. What you need to know is that Euler is easier to understand. I'll switch it, and now we only have X, Y, and Z axis, which makes this very easy to comprehend. If I tweak the X axis, the lower arm will bend. Y will twist and Z will go up and down, which are not realistic actions, so you can leave them for cartoony effects, but you could also lock Y and Z, and so my arm will now only be able to rotate on its natural axis. So that is another advantage of using Eulers. The disadvantage of Eulers is that they are susceptible to something called gimbal lock. Keeping it very light and simple, gimbal lock means that at certain extreme poses, your rig may start behaving unpredictably and not animate the way you expect it to animate. That is why Blender sets the rotation mode to quaternion by default, because it is harder to break. However, the main bones that actually can become gimbal locked are the ones that have a lot of freedom of rotation. And in our rig, that is mainly the upper arm. So you can select all bones, deselect the upper arm controls, shift and click on this bone, for example, set it to XYZ Euler, right click and choose copy to selected. And now all of our bones will be switched to Euler. Euler has different orders of the XYZ axis, and that can help us even more to really prevent gimbal lock. But for now, we'll just keep everything to XYZ Euler. It should be fine in most cases. And with that, you're just one step away from completing the novice level. In the final video, you'll be doing face rigging with a little help from me. It's going to be fun. This is your final challenge in the novice section. Follow along with my time-lapse and you will end up with a simple but surprisingly functional face rig. The goal is to show you that face rigging doesn't need to be difficult and it can be accomplished just with your novice skill set. A quick message before we start. This course has been a beast to create and I'm happy to give it away for free. But if you feel like supporting me, you can go to academy.cgdive.com courses and you'll find Rigging Isn't Scary here. It's the exact same course you're watching on YouTube, but here you can make an optional donation and then you'll be able to watch the videos right here on the site ad-free. But more importantly, you will become part of the CG Dive inner circle, which means that you can help determine the future advanced content we are going to cover. There are other advanced courses here, and you can also go for a subscription, which gives you access to all courses while you stay subscribed. Again, this is entirely optional, but I'd appreciate your support very much. You can also leave a super thanks on YouTube, but if you cannot do any of that, then just liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing the course with someone who would enjoy it would be more than enough. Thank you. Now let's rig the face. Add a new bone, name it jaw, and align it with the jaw of the character. Consider the anatomy of the skull. Duplicate the jawbone to create an eye bone. Name it I.L. Go to your eyes object, select the middle loop of the left eyeball, Shift-S cursor to select it. Go back to your rig, edit mode, select the eye bone, Shift-S selection to cursor, and scale the bone to match the size of the eyeball. Duplicate the eye bone and orient it towards the upper lid. Duplicate again and orient towards the lower eyelid. Name the new bones eyelid B.L and eyelid U.L. Create a new bone at the inner edge of the eyebrow. Name it brow1.L. Duplicate it and position it in the middle of the brow. Then make one more copy at the outer edge of the brow. Name these new bones brow2.L and brow3.L. Make one slightly bigger copy and name it browmaster.L. Make the brow master non-deforming. Parent the small brow bones to the brow master. Select the brow master, all eye bones, and the jawbone, and parent them to the head bone. Select the brow and eye bones and symmetrize them. Go to Object Mode, select all of your meshes, Shift-select the rig, press Ctrl-P and choose With Empty Groups. Empty Groups does almost the same as automatic weights, except that it only adds empty groups for the new bones we just created. It will keep the custom weight paint we did on the body unchanged. Select the face and in edit mode, select the vertices of the lower lip and the jaw area. Do not select any vertices on the upper lip. Now select the rig, Shift-select the face and go to weight paint. Activate the jaw group. It will be black because we only added empty groups, so it does not have any weights yet. Enable the vertex selection toggle. Now you can paint only on the selected vertices, so increase the strength and paint away. Disable vertex selection and then shift and click to soften the weights a bit. Rotate the jawbone to open the mouth and soften the weights on the mouth corners by shift clicking. In object mode, hide the head and select the teeth. Go to edit mode, select all vertices, go to data and remove from all vertex groups. Now select only the vertices of the bottom teeth, find the jaw vertex group and assign the selected vertices to it with a weight of 1. Press Ctrl-I to invert the selection. Now you have the upper teeth selected. Find the head vertex group and assign the selected vertices to it. Now the jawbone opens the mouth along with the teeth. Next, go to the eyes objects, edit mode, select all vertices, and use remove from all vertex groups. Select only the geometry of the left eye, find the eye.L vertex group and click assign. And then assign the verts of the right eye to the eye.R group in the same way. Now the eye bones should control the eyes. Select the rig, shift select the face and go to weight paint mode. Activate the upper eyelid group and carefully paint on the upper eyelid geometry. Do not paint on the lower lid. You will probably want to smooth the weights as well. Now you should be able to close the upper eyelid. Paint and smooth the weights until you get good results. Select the eyelashes object. In edit mode, select all vertices and again remove from all vertex groups. Select only the left eyelash geometry. Find and highlight the eyelid U.L vertex group and click assign. Now select only the right eyelash geometry and assign it to eyelid U.R. Now the eyelashes should also move with the upper eyelid. Select the rig, shift select the face and go to weight paint again. Activate the individual brow bones and weight paint in the area near the bone. Once all brow bones are painted, the individual bones will deform part of the brow and the master bone can move the whole brow. And now something that may seem advanced, but it's pretty easy. We'll make the eyelids react to the movement of the eyeball. Select your rig and go to pose mode. Select the left eye bone, shift select the upper eyelid, press Ctrl-Shift-C, copy rotation. Set local space to local space and influence to around 0.15. Add copy rotation with the same settings to the lower eyelid. And set the mix setting of both constraints to add. That allows you to rotate the bones manually even though they're constrained. Nice! Eyelid displacement. I bet you didn't expect it to be this easy. Set up the constraints on the right side just like on the left side. I forgot to paint weights for the lower eyelid, so let's go to weight paint as usual, activate the bone and paint lightly in the lower eyelid. Nice. If you're up for a challenge, we could add some mouth corner controls as well. Go to edit mode for your rig and add a bone at the left corner of the mouth. Name it mouthcorner.L and symmetrize it. Parent these bones to the head. Go to weight paint as usual, activate the mouth corner and paint around the bone. This will actually automatically create vertex group for these bones as soon as you paint. Now we can move the mouth corners and create simple smile or a frown. But if I open the mouth, it doesn't look nice anymore. These mouth corner bones should move with the jaw. If I just parent them to the jaw, they move too much. I want them to move about half the movement of the jaw. Can you create a new bone that rotates like the jaw but only half the amount? It shouldn't be too difficult. Remember the influence slider that we have on constraints. Okay, in edit mode, duplicate the jawbone and make it slightly smaller. Name it something like MCH jaw mouth. In pose mode, select the jawbone, then shift select the MCH jawbone, press Ctrl-Shift-C, copy rotation. And set influence to 0.5. And that's the whole setup. Now this bone will rotate half of the rotation of the jawbone. Parent the mouth corners to the MCH jawbone. This way the mouth corners will move with the jaw, but only half the amount. Now it is just a matter of going to weight paint mode and balancing the weights around the mouth corners between the jawbone and the mouth bone. Add, remove, and smooth the weights until both opening the jaw and moving the corners looks good. Now I'm going to add shapes to my bones. I will mostly use spheres and circles. To keep it simple, feel free to add your own custom shapes if you like. Here I move the MCH jawbone to the MCH bone collection. Let's make something even cooler, an eye target. Make a copy of one of the eye bones, set the 3D cursor between the two eyes and snap the new bone to that position. Name this new bone MCH Eye Master. In pose mode, I'll remove its shape. Shift select the left eye bone, Ctrl Shift C, copy rotation, with local space and local space, and I'll set copy rotation on the right eye in the same way. Now rotating the eye master will rotate both eyes at the same time. That's cool, but we can do even better. Make a copy of the eye master and move it away on the y-axis. Name it eye target. Shift select the eye master and give it a dumped track constraint. Now moving the target rotates the eye master, which orients both eyes. I'll give the eye target the rectangle shape and tweak its orientation and scale. This is quite a professional looking eye control, if you ask me. To keep control over the individual eyes, select each eye and tweak its copy rotation constraint, setting mix to add. Now I can use the target as the main control and the individual eye controls for finer adjustment. Move the MCH Eye Master to the MCH collection. Now have fun testing your face rig. As I was testing, I noticed a distortion in the face. The reason was because the weights of the neck bone are affecting the face vertices. So some face vertices lag behind. Just paint out the influence by activating the neck group and control clicking on the face. And done. You just completed the NOVICE section. Congratulations are in order. I hope you're excited to go even further and in fact get out of the rigging valley with the intermediate series.